I don't want to go back home to the same old. I felt something had to change.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Sharon Sutton.
We kick off Island Influencers 2022 with Manx-born Phil Crane's life story. He takes us on a journey of many twists and turns personally and through his career. Phil's path starts studying economics and commerce in Liverpool, then working at IBM, qualifying as an accountant, and one day decided to hitchhike to Israel. He takes us through his time at working at KPMG, taking him to Pakistan in the mid-80s, China, and sharing many memories working at Christian Aid in London and Africa. All of his stories highlight how quickly your life can take on a new direction and provide such liberating experiences. Phil loves walking and helping visitors discover the Isle of Man's beauty for themselves, whilst also raising awareness of global issues, poverty, human rights, and climate change, which provide him with great fulfilment. He's a great advocate of taking time to listen, to be with nature and to reflect, or perhaps take a breath to work out what to do next. Here's this week's conversation with Phil Craine in episode 66 of Island Influencers. Welcome to this week's guest, Phil Craine, from the One World Centre to the Island Influencers podcast. Phil, thank you very much for venturing out on what's a really cold, wintry day with half a tree lying across our bridge after,
thank you, Sharon.
After Storm
I was worried
Arwen.
about that.
Yes. So thank you very much for coming along. So the way I always start every episode really is just to ask you to kind of tell our listeners all about yourself and where you've come from, and indeed how you've ended up through your story to today. So where did it all start out for you?
Okay. Well, I was born and raised on the island.
Yeah.
We moved around a bit when I grew up. We lived in Onchan, in Douglas, in Peel. Then I went to college when I was 18 across, as many people do. And I stayed away for over 25 years.
So what did you do when you... so you went to Douglas High School?
Yes.
Yeah. And where did you go to college? What did you do there?
I went to Liverpool Uni.
Okay.
I did commerce.
Right.
And after that, I joined IBM for a year down in Hampshire. I spent a year there.
Yes.
I felt it was... I went because it was the uni milk round. They offered me the most money, and I thought, well, I'll go for that. So I spent a year at the UK headquarters of IBM.
My goodness, which is where?
Down in near Portsmouth.
Okay.
And that was there. About 3,000 people worked there, I think.
Gosh.
I was in finance.
It's the very early days of computers, really.
Yes,
yeah.
And IBM was a top model there. They put me on their graduate training scheme, and
Fab.
That was put me in a huge room. The first year was spent in accounts receivable, which is kind of American for debt collection.
Right.
On typewriters, and they were just getting into the computer market too at the time. This was the late 70s, and they and it was a huge room, and everyone was pigeonholed quite rigidly. So I was responsible with two teammates for getting in the debts on the people who lived in Surrey and Sussex with surnames A to C.
Okay.
So
right.
So that was it, and with making phone calls and sending out final notice letters, etc., and it was a lovely place to live. I like the South Coast, but the job, I just thought, is this it? You come out of uni, and I was just so pigeonholed, and I felt like a very small cog in a big wheel, which is what it was. I met a friend at the time. We were flat sharing, and she had just come back from kibbutz in Israel, which was the kind of hippie thing to do at the time. And she told me all about that, and that seemed to be everything that IBM wasn't.
Okay. So what did you do?
So I handed my notice in and crossed the channel and stuck my thumb up and started hitching towards Israel.
Did you really? Gosh.
So
what age would you have been there?
23.
Golly. Yeah.
So bit of a false start, really, in terms of my my career, but in a way, a liberation. I think I'd sort of maybe done everything that was expected of me up to that point, but this was in a way following my heart. And it was out on the kibbutz. It's very much a kind of I suppose a socialist model of the situation. They'd set up a collective farm out in Israel, the early settlers, and this was the kibbutz a few decades later. Very much, on socialist principles, but we, the Western volunteers were very much for second-class citizens out there. Gosh. But, I was picking clementines and working in a rubber factory, cleaning the swimming pool, and it was, you worked from 6 to 12. It was a different way of life. All the kibbutzniks, the Israeli members, had put their life savings into it, and everything was owned collectively. So it was an exposure to a very interesting, different model.
Absolutely.
And people finished work at 12 o'clock, 12 noon. So, you'd see dads cycling around with their kids in the afternoon, which you wouldn't hear. Kids brought up collectively in a kibbutz children's home. And so very much a model of community living, which has interested me since.
Yeah. What did you learn?
I think I learned that money is not the be-all and end-all, which, in a sense, I wasn't a surprise to me. I'd grown up with those sort of values, but it was interesting to see it in practice. And when I came back home afterwards, I spent a few months not knowing what to do. I got a job with Dial a Cab on the island, and was a taxi driver for a few months. This was the summer of 79, and I remember driving a Ford Cortina Mark III with a Starsky and Hutch Go Faster white stripe along the Douglas Prom.
Fantastic.
Thinking I was the bee's knees, belting out Blondie's Parallel Lines album. It's all coming back.
I'm sure I saw you. Yes. Oh my goodness. So you didn't stay to be a taxi driver that long, I suppose.
No.
Had your eyes opened from this?
I don't think I've ever been so well paid ever since. But I did the night shift was particularly lucrative, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. In those days, the CAS was open till 5 o'clock, so that kept you going throughout the night. And I think towards the end of the summer, I left and I went on an Interrail journey around Europe, which you could do. I think the cost was £93 for a month for a rail ticket around Europe. So that was fun. And then I joined Pete Marwick Mitchell,
KPMG.
the PM of which is now KPMG in London, and I did my articles for accountancy there.
In London? Mm-hmm. Right, okay. So you came back, did a bit of taxi driving, and then went back to London. Okay. So what was, did that lead you into other things? Was it what was the attraction of training as an accountant?
I was always good at sums at school, and I thought I had the commerce degree, so I thought I would give it a chance. I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life, and I thought that getting an accountancy qualification would be something that I could have a decent stab at, and yet it would keep options open for the future. Okay,
very good. So what did it lead into?
I think after I qualified, I got a year's post-qualification experience. It was good sort of people management really after that, and I at this point, one of the things I did, which was a formative experience for me, I can still remember it as if it were yesterday. Pete's, which we called the firm, sent me as a student accountant to Sudan for I think 2 or 3 months, and this was we were subcontracted by Morgan Grenfell as part of the World Bank thing to reschedule Sudan's debts. Debt rescheduling was very much a thing at the time for many sub-Saharan African countries. Yeah. And So a team of us went out. We were put up at the Hilton in Khartoum, and beautiful views of the confluence of the Blue and White Niles. And this was my first time outside Europe, apart from Israel, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I can still remember standing on the balcony on the 8th floor of the Hilton Hotel in Khartoum, looking down in the grounds of the hotel to the pool, the sun lounges, the bar and the pool, the watered grass tennis courts, in the middle of the desert this was, and all the trappings, I suppose, of any posh Western hotel.
Yeah, no problems at all in the world then.
No, except that just the tiny problem was that from my 8th floor vantage point, I could see beyond the hotel perimeter, and the hotel perimeter was about a 5-meter high wall with barbed wire around the outside, and beyond that, I could see just meters outside the wall, scrubland. That was got maybe a thorn bush, acacia bush, and there was the desert and the Nile beyond, and there was a guy sort of in ragged local clothes. He was a goat herd with a flock of about 6 goats, and they were kind of pawing on the thorn bush, trying to get a bit of foliage. And he was living in a kind of cardboard box, trying to get some shelter from the afternoon sun. And he was just a few yards away from the guys playing tennis on the watered court, with the wall in between. And they couldn't see each other, of course, but I could see them both.
Right.
And I thought, this isn't a good way to run the world. And I didn't take a photo, but the photo is inside my brain still. And
it just sounds like the whole of Africa, to be honest with you. It's
So that was an eye opener, being in Sudan. And after I qualified, I was sure that I wanted to do some sort of voluntary work overseas.
Right. So that led on to your next role, I think, which, looking at your extensive CV that you were kind enough to provide me in advance, you ended up in Pakistan.
Yeah, I did 2 years out in Pakistan. I applied to VSO, who turned me down because they thought you just fresh out of uni, and so they. But that was before I had the accountancy qualification, and then now I did that. That indeed was a key to unlocking opportunities abroad. Yeah. So I went with CMS, Church Mission Society, and they seconded me to an NGO called the Society for Community Development in Pakistan, and I made an open offer. They could send me anywhere in the world. So this was somewhere that specifically wanted an accountant. It was a vocational training school. They taught Punjabi kids woodwork, metalwork, some English language drafting, and machine workshops, refrigeration, auto repair, you name it.
Proper life skills,
Yeah, so...
and was accountancy one of the things that you taught them?
It was. I taught a bit of it, but the job I actually went for was to be bursar at the school.
Right.
And the guy who met me at Lahore airport, he said, we've had a meeting last night, and we've decided, the committee's decided to appoint my son as bursar. But we'll find something for you, don't worry. So I thought, don't panic, I'm here now. And that worked out to be fine, because what he did was he offered me basically to NGOs in Pakistan to come and do financial work, auditing work primarily, on their accounts. This was when mid-80s now, when Pakistan was inundated with literally millions of Afghan refugees. They're still there to this day.
Sure.
So that was a great way of seeing what is a beautiful country, and up to the northwest frontier, down to Sindh, and all places around there. And so that was an eye opener. And we were treated by Pakistanis as you know, as if we were royalty. You know, just the hospitality from rich and poor, from Muslim, from Christian. It was taught me a lot about hospitality and welcoming the guest.
Very good. So what did you learn from that?
Well, I say the value of hospitality. You know, the value of welcoming the guest, the stranger in the midst.
Sorry, I mean to take home with you. Did it? Because you stayed there till 86. Well, why did you leave? And you know, what did you take with you?
Yeah,
to
it
next?
was a 2-year fixed term contract.
Yeah. I see.
And so that was when we left. I went up to the border had just opened with Xinjiang in China, so went up there and did a bit more travelling.
Yes, and then you came back to the UK.
And then I came back to the UK. I thought, what next?
Yeah.
One of the churches that was supporting me in Pakistan was you were required to get 4 churches to support you, and one of them was one I didn't know before, but CMS arranged it for me. Was a church in Hounslow, West London. Yeah. And you go and visit it when you come back, and they offered me a job. Yeah. They just a few years before they'd opened a bookshop and coffee shop on the high street in Hounslow, and I thought, well, give it a go.
So you've got some decent barista skills going on there.
I'm enjoying the coffee here.
That's good.
So that was that.
It's interesting. I mean, you know, the Church Missionary Society. I guess what they do is they help churches fund. There's lots of denominations of churches, and I don't suppose they can all afford to do.
No, the Church Mission Society it's an Anglican institution, Church of England, but they were happy to accept me as a non-Anglican. Yeah. They wanted, you know, they very much chose you for your skill set, and you know your motivation. Right. So that was that, and this was an Anglican church.
Do they still do this? Is this still a
yes? So I'm still a member, a supporter.
Right.
And they
it's
work.
Fascinating.
Yeah. They do good stuff in.
Yeah, you'll have to send me some information on that
UK.
that we can put in the show notes. That would be good. So after that, you did a stint for Christian Aid, again in London.
Yes, and again, so I'd come back, and I suppose I'd got a taste for and understood, you know, this this epiphany I'd had in this Hilton Hotel in Khartoum that the world is a
work in progress.
Very much a work in progress, and you know, riven by deep divides and fault lines. And so I was made redundant from a coffee shop. You know, they got into financial difficulties and they eventually closed. So I
maybe not that good at coffee making.
Definitely not. I've never been back to barista or taxi driving since. I'd written off to Christian Aid, an organisation that, you know, I was supporting before, and saying, you know, if any jobs come up, I'd be interested. And they sent me a standard letter back saying, "Oh, thank you, nothing available, but we'll keep you on file."
Yeah, we've all had those letters.
Yeah, and then you think nothing more about it, and then shock horror. I think a short time later, they got a letter saying, "Oh, there's a vacancy for a financial accountant in our headquarters in London. Right. Would you be interested?" So I applied and was fortunate and got the job. Different model to CMS. Christian Aid is very much a funding organisation based in the UK and Ireland, which doesn't. It's not operational, but rather it works through partners overseas in Africa, Asia, Latin America.
Like what? So is there an example? I don't know.
Yeah, it could be secular or Christian or Muslim partners, but involved in maybe different aspects of development. It could be water, it could be health, it could be food, it could be water, sanitation.
So specific
human
targeted,
rights.
Focused projects.
Yeah, but right across for different sectors there. And so they... I stayed for a couple of years in the finance department as financial accountant, but I had an itch to get onto the operational side, and a vacancy came up for someone with finance skills in the Horn of Africa team, and so I moved across to that. And this was still based in London, but with regular trips to that region, primarily Ethiopia, Somalia, all at different times. So this was the 90s now and the noughties, an area that was riven by war, extreme poverty, and underdevelopment. So that was very interesting, seeing those countries again, and took me back to Khartoum as well.
Yeah.
And I went up to the 8th floor of the Hilton just for old time's sake. I didn't see the guy in the cardboard box anymore. Maybe he'd moved on or died. So that got me into Christian Aid, and I spent 23 years altogether with them.
Gosh.
In different places.
Yeah, and you came back to the Isle of Man during that, did you? Or,
I came back. I had 13 years in the UK in finance and on the Horn of Africa team, and then I came back to the island in 2003, and I had 10 years on the island, very much in a different role, more fundraising and education and campaigning. Because Christian Aid retains about 10% of its income, I think, for trying to address the underlying causes of poverty in the West. So it does a lot of education and campaigning on those issues.
You mean in locale here?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's sort of symbiotic in that respect with places like the food bank and Samaritans and Okay. Interesting. That's thank you for sharing all that. And then you took on a role for a human rights monitor on the West Bank. How did you get involved in that? It was just a short-term contract, was it?
Well, yes. I got involved in that because at the end of 2013, I and a friend from the island, we decided to take some time out and walk the Camino to Santiago in northern Spain. It's kind of an ancient pilgrimage route, but which in modern times has seen a revival. And you've got hundreds of thousands. This was pre-COVID, of people of all ages and motivations walking along it. And as we walked along it, you gradually slip down the gears, and I felt that stirrings, going on. You become more attuned to the natural rhythms of nature. You stop wearing a watch. You're looking at the sun's shadow more, and I thought, I don't want to go back home to the same old status quo ante, and I felt something had to change. And in a way, I knew that my life here had become too busy, too many things going on, too many hats. I'd be interested to see how you've addressed that, Phil. And the conclusion I came to was that my paid job, which was Christian Aid, and although it was half time, that was the one that really needed to go to make a difference. At the same time, an opportunity came up for me to spend 3 months on the West Bank as a human rights observer, monitor, with a different organisation, different charity called EAPI. It's a bit of a mouthful, the Ecumenical Accompaniment Programme in Palestine and Israel. And the idea is that international neutral observers are placed in potential hotspots
yeah.
are in the occupied West Bank, and they had 7 different houses there throughout the West Bank, and you would be placed, for example, where you get a phone call from the UN office saying, hey, there's a house demolition going on in East Jerusalem. We were stationed in East Jerusalem, and you had to attend and monitor and speak to the people, either the police who were doing the demolition or the resident, the owner, and report back. Or it might have been incidents of where Israeli settlers had uprooted newly planted olive saplings, many different human rights abuses that were going on.
Yeah.
And although I neither have a brief for the Israelis nor the Palestinians, the idea was that we could be posted at such hotspots to deter violence from otherwise taking place.
So diffuse the situation before it got out of hand.
Yeah, so our tools were our smartphones and our notebooks.
Yeah.
And we report back, and we wore a special vest, so we were very visible. It'd been a program that had been running for 15 years. So
is it still running?
Yes, it is, and it's taken. I think it's taken a hit during COVID, but people are going back in early 22.
Yeah, so it does a lot of good, really. So
it's very much although you have to be even-handed, there's no denying the underlying situation that one side in the conflict has got the other side under the thumb and there's. It's a military occupation there, and between 2 very unequal sides.
Sort of set in place at the end of the Second World War with just some generals with a drawing on a map.
Yes, and very much coming out of that Second World War, the desire for justice by the Jews to have a homeland of their own where they feel safe, and that's important. Since 1967, they've occupied the West Bank by force, which is home to that 3 million Palestinians, and now you've got the Israeli settlers. So it's a difficult a problem that the world is still wrestling with.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, so you came back from there and back to the Isle of Man.
To the Isle of Man, and
quite a change of occupation for you.
What
really.
next? In 2014, I tried to kind of reinvent myself as a tour guide, which was going well till COVID came along. Much of there's a guild of Manx registered tour guides.
Yes, you're a blue badge.
I'm a blue badge, and most of our business with the visiting cruise ships.
Yeah,
which many come in the summer, and we're hoping that there's going to be another 40 coming in next summer, but we were hoping that last 12 months ago too, so don't count any chickens. But I've always enjoyed showing people around the island when they come over, and I thought this was a natural extension and a few pennies too, so that was good. So I'm still doing that.
Sure. So how did you get involved in the One World Centre?
2004. Soon after I came back to the island, a couple of friends and I were aware that there was, in a way, a gap in the market, I suppose is one way of putting it, for opening what's known in the trade as a development education centre here. So it's trying to raise awareness on the island of global issues, of poverty, of human rights, and now, of course, of climate change. And trying to raise awareness of those issues, but challenging people to make a response to those issues, not just wringing their hands and say, isn't it awful, but what can we do about some of these issues? And so that's what we've set up the One World Centre. It's now, 17 years old, and we've moved offices a few times, but we're still going strong.
Yes.
Much of our target is at schools, but not all. Every time there's a Disasters Emergency Committee appeal, for example. If there's a tsunami or a conflict somewhere and they issue an appeal, we too will hold a street collection in many towns on the island to try to raise funds for that.
Yeah.
But our bread and butter is trying to raise awareness of those global issues. So
so it's I looked on the One World website. It says the aim is to educate a fair and sustainable world for everyone. So that sounds like.
Yes.
You're doing that?
Yes, and so, and particularly in schools, but the general public too. So we have one of our flagship programs is One World Charity Challenge, which is an inter-schools contest for Year 12s.
We had Sarah Comish on a few weeks ago. She's involved in that. Yes.
All right. Yes. So Sarah's now stepped back to take a job with the NFU.
That's right.
We've got Helen Neal, who's now taken over there. So she this winter, as in others, she prepares the schools. The school team of maybe 4 or 5 get matched with a charity which is got some Isle of Man connection to it, but which is working overseas.
Okay.
They learn about it, they research, they meet the charity insofar as they're able to, and they do I think a 10-minute presentation of the grand final in March, having come through their inter-schools heat. And it's a competition, and we get generous funding for that, both from the prize fund and for ourselves running it, from AFD Software.
Oh, fantastic! Yes,
it was very generous.
David Doricott was a guest on the show a few months ago. Yeah.
Right, so that's great, and we hold the final up at their place at Babbage's in Lezayre. So that's one of our flagships. I guess another one is the Global Village, held here at St John's at the Arboretum.
Yes,
behind the Fairfield.
Great food
every Tynwald day. So we have about 4 or 5, African, Jamaican, German cuisines there, and again, it's an attempt to try to raise awareness of what local Manx charities are doing in this field.
That sounds splendid. Do you? How do you get these charities involved? Do you have a list, or if anybody who from a charity listening to this and thinks, our charity could do with being participant in this, how would they?
Contact the One World Centre. So long as they've got some interest or are working or fundraising towards a project in addressing poverty or human rights in the developing world, then we'd love to hear from them.
Oh, that sounds great. We'll certainly do that. So and we're looking at the website, and it said that there's a list, and I always look for ideas. What's been done, and so you had a load of ideas on there. I'm just wondering because they were all like last year, and I know it's things have moved on, but are you working on those, and do you have any ideas for new ones?
We did manage to get the Global Village in last year in 21, which we hadn't in 2020.
Yes,
we got a final 2 off the charity challenge in, but there's other stuff we do throughout the year, which Wendy Shimon, who is a coordinator at the One World Centre, she's been pushing lately the sustainable development goals, especially in schools. So she's been going around, I think, 3 or 4 schools, again with the format of the COP. The UN COP in Glasgow, as if they were having to participate in that. So it builds awareness of the issues, whether it's on transport or energy, but also of the difficulties of diplomacy and negotiation and having to come to an agreed resolution on these issues. So they play the part of countries. So that's a great thing that's been going on too. We've got Phil Matthews, who's just organised the final of the Poetry Slam. He was one of the founders too, along with myself. So that's inviting younger kids to come up with a poetry slam, which they perform again.
So is it like rap? Is it?
Well, that's what I thought, but I was corrected. No, I think rap might be music, but this is pure lyric.
So poetry.
Yes. But performance poetry.
Great.
And choreographed.
They had somebody over.
Poetry.
They had somebody over before COVID. It was a poetry rapper that was at KWC that my son was in a competition. Yeah,
Yes,
it was really good.
Yes.
Can't
So
remember
we
his
we
name.
had the final to that a couple of weeks ago at the Laxey Institute. So that was good. So stuff like that is what the One World Centre is all about.
Yeah, it sounds great, and we will put some show notes together for that.
Thank you.
So that listeners can go and find out all about it. It's a very active website. There's stuff going on all the time. I was very impressed. In the last 3 weeks, there's been stuff every weekend, and the COP26 was that was a good read. Thank you for all you're doing. That's it's really impressive and needed. And as you say, in the age of the 3 C's that Mark Carney put it, didn't he? He said we live in the age of COVID, credit, and climate. Yeah, you've got plenty to be going on, haven't you? So, if you don't mind me asking, and I primarily do ask this in my day job, my role as a financial planner, what was your earliest memory of money? I mean, how was money growing up, and did that shape what your choices that you made? It sounds like the sort of light bulb moment you had in the Sudan was one of those. So I'm just wondering if it was reflective from that.
Yeah, I think one early memory of money maybe was at Murray's Road School. When we were encouraged to, I remember coming in, Monday was when you brought your 1 and 3pence in for your milk money, 3pence a bottle. I'm talking old pence here.
Yeah.
And
I'm just about old enough to remember that.
I'm well old enough to remember that. And then Tuesday was you brought in your shilling for your national savings stamp. And a voluntary thing, but Mum and Dad gave me the shilling, and we bought the 1 shilling savings stamp. I was savings stamp monitor along with my friend Andrew, and we would go along to the Crosby Terrace post office and buy the required number of savings stamps. These would be given to the kids in exchange for their shilling, and you'd stick it in your national savings book.
I remember those.
And then you would, when you got a pound, you would then go to the post office, hand in the book of stamps, and you would be given a national savings certificate.
I don't remember that bit.
And so I remember my number was BAD bad 367. So that was it's amazing what you can remember,
isn't it?
So the point is it was about thrift and savings.
Yeah.
And maybe we've lost something in those, because I don't think that happens for 1 minute today. Another early memory.
You might have a point, although there are sort of redeeming things happening.
The Isle of Man Bank had piggy banks, didn't they? I think.
Yeah, I don't think that misses the point, but what things like junior achievement have probably got.
Oh yeah,
more going for them there.
I'm sure. But another thing comes to mind on money, and that is probably about the same age. I don't know, 6, 7. We had this board game called Rich Uncle, which was Waddington's, so it must have been British, but the scenario of the game was set in America. It was all about buying stocks and shares.
Wow.
And if you got a complete set in one industry, you advanced and you eventually won the game. I don't know if I did or not.
Really?
Yeah. But
for listeners, that's not how you pick a share portfolio.
And again, like I suppose millions of others, maybe a bit later, we had a Monopoly, so that would come out at Christmas. And again, it's about what's the message going on in these games? It's about accumulation of stocks and shares, of money, of houses, of hotels, property, and I suppose there's it reflects in a way society's message that you can get happiness, you can win the game through accumulation and growth, and I've learned since that is a myth.
Okay, well, we can have a discussion on that, but I mean, the principle behind money giving you happiness, absolutely agree with you, but it gives you choices, that's for sure. as long as you make the right choices. So of all the things you've done throughout your life so far, what things have given you the most fulfilment, Phil?
I think the One World Centre certainly is part of it. I'm a person of faith. That certainly gives me fulfill. You
can tell that from your CV.
So the tour guiding brings me fulfilment, when I have a chance to do it. It's good to show people the island, So there's walking gives me fulfilment, like you mentioned the Camino here. Particularly love walking around the island. One thing that I'm involved in is the Keels Week, praying the Keels Week each May. We're encouraging people to get out and walk. The idea of pilgrimage has come out of the Camino in a way. A few friends and I have developed a Manx pilgrimage route called the Triskelion Way, which is runs 60 kilometres, 36 miles from Rushen Abbey to Mackald via Peel. So it links the three arguably most significant historic Christian centres together, and takes in some luscious scenery along the way too.
That sounds great.
So we try to do that each year. We put some waymarks up. We're writing a guidebook for it at the moment. So I think the idea of, as I found on the Camino, of taking time out to step back, step down, can provide an opportunity for listening. I would say listening to God, for in nature, in creation, of what can come next.
Yeah. What do you do to relax? How do you keep your life in balance?
Walking. I do.
Okay.
I love walking. And, I live in Douglas now, and, even it could be 9 or 10 o'clock at night. If I've spent too much time on the computer screen, I can just take myself off and go on the prom or down Tremode, and that helps me unwind.
Yeah, so I suppose I could almost guess the answer to this, but what do you think about the best things about living in the Isle of Man? Given you've seen quite a lot of the world.
It's lovely to be back. I feel rooted in my home here now.
Yeah. Parents still alive?
No.
Oh,
no,
that's a shame.
No, that was one reason why I came back in 2003. But they've passed a while ago now, so I love being I love being part of the community. I think that there's I love the landscape here. I love the fact that the sea is on the doorstep. That hasn't always been the case in places I've lived across. I think having been across makes me appreciate the island more. And when I first came back, I thought, I know this place like the back of my hand. And in a way that I'm still feeling, no, that's not the case. I'm discovering. You're driving along a road even, and you see a public footpath sign. Oh, where does that go? I've never been across there. So, there's lots of places still to discover on the island.
There's lots of little nooks and crannies. You get there, I go to mountain biking, and you just look at you think, I've never seen that view before. Am I in the Isle of Man? This is amazing. Yeah, yes. It is. It's an incredible countryside. Yeah. And,
a few weeks ago I was walking, a Beery Mountain not far from here, but then behind there, up towards Mullinrenass and that area there. It's very remote on the island.
Yes, it is.
Earlier this summer I went down to Erie Cushlin. Again, you can't see any man-made building around there. So there's these gems over here.
Yeah, there are. Yeah. What would you say the main challenges are the Isle of Man faces?
I think I love the island very much. I love the landscape, scenery, the people. I think the challenges are, I suppose, I've had concerns, and maybe this came out of my time at Christian Aid, about sometimes the harm that aspects of our economy
capitalism,
can do.
You mean?
That's a divisive word in a way, but this I suppose desire for growth, desire for accumulation, as I spoke of before, but also aspects of the Manx economy can be harmful. I think when we look at the whole offshore model, it's predicated on people who are mainly living off the island trying to escape, legally or illegally, their taxation obligations by putting money through the island, and that's very harmful to those economies, whether it's the UK or whether it's further afield in Sudan or India or wherever. You've often got the elites of those countries squirreling away their wealth.
No, I see. I mean, the beneficial ownership register should help that. You can see that a lot of changes have been. Yeah,
and I think there are signs of change and hope. You mentioned the beneficial ownership register, and the Manx government has made a political commitment to make that public. We've already got a very good register, but it's not public yet. But they say they will do it by the end of 2023, which seems a long way down the line. But they were hoping that access to find out exactly who the owners are of each Manx registered company will open some windows and throw light on transparency so that the media, Joe Public, NGOs can look and find out this information. Because I think that one of the badges of a tax haven is not just the low tax, but it's also the secrecy which goes along with it, and this step will be one part of addressing that. But we've still got an island where, although charity accounts have to be put in, we've got to get everything, all the dots and the dot our I's and cross the T's on that. Company accounts, they have to be submitted, but they're secret. You or I can't get to see them, and so there's aspects of that. There's the way too that many corporate service providers set up schemes, firms of opening wealth solutions are often bandied so that. Well, typically, you might get self-employed contractors in the UK who've never worked, never been to the island, but they route their payroll through the island, and then it's given back to them sometimes in the form of loans, which everybody understands will never be repaid. And the point about loans is that they're not taxable. Now, the HMRC is clamping down on these now.
Yeah, but that changed a while ago. A lot of that.
But for the UK, it's still happening. The Manx firms are taking money from other jurisdictions. That's still going. So
I don't know about that. Oh, I know from our perspective, we're a regulated firm, and in terms of anti-money laundering and know your client, and tax avoidance and tax evasion, that's taken to the letter. And I speak for this license holder, and I hope all of them. We all do our utmost to abide by that. And it's, for example, when you're a financial planning firm, if you would try to ultimately help somebody invest their money, it's a very lengthy process to do that in order to justify suitability. Yes. On the other hand, if you could go to the internet and try and invest your money, that's so easy. It's so easy to invest your money. Just go, you can get all sorts of rates promised no matter what. And you might never see it again, but you'll get the promise of a really good return. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to do that. Mm-hmm. But it's perception and reality, and we all have lessons to learn, and I guess it would be a lot easier if everybody adopted a fiduciary attitude, wouldn't it?
Sure. I think too, that I've got qualms about the e-gaming sector over here. That again, I would not doubt for 1 minute that they have brought jobs and prosperity to the island, and
definitely,
they've hundreds, if not thousands, are employed in many handsomely paid jobs in that sector. But again, I ask the question: what harm are they doing? And this is we've got in Britain now, there's 1/3 of a million problem gamblers, and that's defined as people who are addicted or likely to develop an addiction.
Sure.
And with, unlike an addiction to drugs or alcohol, this is largely an unseen addiction, but which affects the whole family of people concerned, with unemployment, debt, family breakup, and these firms are headquartered here. And I'd stress I wouldn't judge anyone who's working in that industry, but the companies and the owners involved, they must take responsibility for pushing that. We've got a regulator over here, the Gambling Supervision Commission,
who's very highly thought of.
Yes, I'm sure, but I don't see any curbs that they're issuing on limiting maximum stake or advertising by these firms, which the UK regulator regularly does. And it's very difficult for the regulator over here in a small jurisdiction because the Isle of Man government's policy is to actively encourage the industry, and yet it's set up a regulator, and you can see the conflict that the regulator must be
absolutely
in.
Regulator, commerce on one side, and consumer benefits and interests on another. It must always, for a regulator, must always go first with the consumer, and to protect the consumer and uphold the consumer's interests.
But that would mean talking about limiting advertising and stakes.
Yeah, well,
the UK brought in a couple of years ago. They brought down the maximum stake of these fixed odds betting terminals in pubs and bookies' offices from £100 to £2.
Right.
And the industry screamed. They didn't like it.
No, of course not. No.
But that was done because the MP saw the harm. Now, how I don't see a parallel happening over here.
I don't know, Phil. I don't know anything about that sector really, other than I see a lot of investment in the community, and perhaps the other side of somebody might want to come on and talk about the good that they're doing. I don't know.
And all I'm saying is, yes, they undoubtedly brought the island prosperity and many jobs.
I mean, addictions are bad in anything, aren't they? Drugs, alcohol, gambling, any addiction is unhealthy. So balance, moderation.
Yes, and to some extent, I think we're all addicted to something. But I think there's it's a question of how much we want to encourage it, and
if it's usurious or not. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. No, I get all that. Yes. Okay. Well, so what solutions and opportunities would you see? What could you do? Say you're in charge. What would you do?
Okay. Well, I think. If we go back to the offshore model, I think, as you've said, we can bring in more transparency, particularly on that. I think I'd look at some of the activities of these payroll schemes. I would like to review the whole 0% corporate tax.
Doesn't sound like we're going to have much of a choice with Joe Biden.
No,
as his way,
Joe Biden is my poster boy. He's on my fridge, so he's and maybe the climate was changing anyway. But that since the 80s we've had just a steady ongoing decline in corporate tax rates, race to the bottom it's often called, and I think but that has turned around, and now we're he's talking of a global minimum of 15%, which may not affect the island, but let's see how that plays out. But the climate has changed, and I think some firms, from what I hear on the island, are recognising that the offshore model, maybe the days are numbered. But why shouldn't companies over here pay a share of their profits in tax? That seems to be the norm throughout Western Europe and the States, that companies who do well out of the island in many ways. They enjoy decent health service, schools for the kids, roadworks, prom notwithstanding maybe, and law and order and courts. These are all things that serve their interests, and it seems to me only fair that they should make a contribution to them. I'm not denying that they're generous, many of them, to charities, but stick a couple of noughts on it and call it tax, please, and that would really help society over here.
Yeah, perhaps it would. Yep, maybe, but. For those who own and operate companies here, though, it's different, isn't it? I mean, I'd hate anybody listening to this to think that any business it's running here, that it's people who live here actually don't pay their share of taxes. Because they all absolutely do, but it comes out one way or the other. And corporation tax, call it what you will. It's whether that's something that does ultimately happen. There's still a rate which we all have to pay as a result of our activity in the community and our fair share, I think.
Yes, I think the stats we're told puts the Isle of Man as the 8th richest jurisdiction in the world. So there is taxable wealth over here, I think, you hear too of worrying accounts of where individuals have set up private investment companies. So Phil Craine becomes Phil Craine Limited. I plough all my rents, my interest, my dividends, my salary into that, and it's all taxed at 0%. Now I will have the
rental income has a withholding tax, so property income you can't get property income net, as far as I understand, anyway.
Okay, so everything else is in the company. All my earnings
yes,
are in the company.
But as soon as you take it out, it's taxed.
As soon as I take it out, it's taxed.
Yeah,
in Phil Craine, and I have to pay tax on
that. At 20%. Yeah.
Yes. Now, but I only have to take out of the company what I need to live on.
You do.
And that could be a mere fraction, if I'm wealthy enough,
yes,
of my total wealth. Mm-hmm. The rest, year on year, accumulates untaxed.
Yes, it does.
And that, to me, seems unfair.
But ultimately, you cannot get it out of that company without paying the tax.
I could sell it to my wife. I could die, and then the capital would all get passed on as capital, untaxed. There's a worry that this is a big loophole, and it's entirely tax avoidance because it's open to all, and I believe it's widely taken advantage of. So this accumulates, and then it could be sold. The company could be sold as capital to anybody.
So what have you got planned next, Phil? I mean, what's the One World got on? What are you going to do to put a ding in the universe?
I don't know. I'll see what comes. Got no plans. As I say, there's tour guiding. There might be a bit of business in 2022, but there's different.
So the One World will keep on doing its programs.
Yes, and we're
educating, and
we're always in need of funding, and so if anybody hears this and. And despite all I've said, still wants to fund the One World. But I would point out as well that there's been a wide-ranging conversation, Sharon. But the what I'm saying about the e-gaming industry and the offshore industry, I haven't got my One World Centre hat on at all.
That's your personal views.
Those are my personal views, and we've got a separate organisation.
Yeah, so if a big gaming company come along and say, I'm going to give you £1 million, fund it, what are you going to do? Turn it down? No. Okay. What books have you read recently that you'd recommend to listeners as a source of inspiration? Thought to get you on the right path.
Well, it was a 4-volume set of. I continued this in lockdown. But do you remember the old Pelican reference books?
No.
Not sure. Okay.
Not sure.
They were great in the 70s and 80s. Always had blue spines. Came out of the Penguin imprint, and came across a 4-volume paperback Pelican series. So I came across this box series of 4 volumes Pelican called The Social History of England, written in 1944 by academic historian called G.M. Trevelyan, and I loved it. So it's the history of England, the British Isles, really, with the the kings and the queens and the battles taken out. So the politics is taken out of it.
Oh, right.
So it's like...
What happened?
It's what and for ordinary people, when did we start using knives and forks instead of spoons? How did dress change over the centuries? Architecture, and I love that. I think I've become more interested in history as I've grown older, and so that fed that.
Yeah, architecture is interesting though, isn't it?
Yeah.
What happened so that they could afford to build that really nice set of buildings in London and Liverpool? Oh,
yes.
Let me think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the whole slave trade.
I know.
Is over here, and the island has interesting questions to answer on that as well. I mean, we played a big part of that in the 18th century and brought a lot of wealth to the island.
Yeah.
And we, again, there's a parallel here, because the ships came out of Liverpool bound for West Africa. Half of them, no less than half, stopped in the island in Douglas, Castletown, to stock up on the goods that were needed for the voyage. So they would load up here with iron bars, with beads to be traded with the African chiefs for slaves, and Douglas was a giant warehouse, and this was a big part of it. Manx mariners, Manx ships, Manx captains were also involved.
I had no idea.
And so that brought a lot of wealth to 18th century shipbuilding, but anything to do with commerce to the island as a whole, because these were merchants who were buying stuff in for the slaving voyages. This was at the same time that smuggling was going on. After the three legs of the transatlantic trade, the ships would come. Some would come back to the island laden with rum, sugar, rice, cotton from North America and the West Indies, and that would be landed here, and then that would be legal, and then the illegal bit was smuggling it off. But the reason that the island serviced this trade from Liverpool to West Africa was that all this stuff that I mentioned could be imported into the island at very low duties. If any.
Gosh.
So, rien ne change plus, nothing changes. And so that's what brought a lot of wealth to the island in the 18th century.
Wonder what the Stanleys were so keen on. Fair enough. So what's your favourite quote, other than the one you just said? That was pretty good.
Well, my favourite quote, it's hard to choose, but the one I've gone with is one that is stuck on my bedroom wall. You can see the blue tack on the back.
Yeah.
And it's from the 20th century American monk Thomas Merton, and I find it very challenging. And it goes as follows: "Our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy."
Good one. Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. So where can people go to learn more about you and the causes that you represent? Do you want to send me a list and I'll put them, because there's quite a few, aren't there? There's the One World,
One World, United Nations, the Keels, the Pilgrimage, Tax Watch.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll put those in our show notes.
Okay.
But listen, thank you so much for coming along today and sharing some forthright views, but some interesting ones. And it's you're living your life to serve others. So anyway, I suppose I just want to say thank you very much, Phil, for coming along and talking to me today.
Well, thank you, Sharon, for the invitation, the opportunity.